All right, everybody. Thank you all for being here. Doing these regularly. We'll be doing them once a week to talk about, I guess, pretty much anything. There was an idea, thought that this one would be focused on development, but really it's a town hall. So anything that people want to talk about, I'd like to. I want to make sure that we, have the mic go around, because if you don't use the mic, then it might not be caught on the video for people who might want to watch it later. Okay. I don't know if anybody has any particular topic they'd like to discuss right now. I'm open. So anybody raise your hand, let me know. You got one? Okay.
Going to the main topic of development that we talked about last time.
Development.
This might be require too complicated of an answer and too long of an answer, so that's fine if you don't want to address it. But just for my own edification, sort of civics 101, what is the mayor's role and the administration's role in developments, like at different stages? Because we have some that are very long term, like the Severance development, and then we have others that are nearing completion. So how exactly does the mayor and city government get involved with those developments?
So the way that it is designed to work is that the mayor's office, our Department of Planning, Neighborhoods and Development, all work together to do a couple different things. One, we try to find people who may want to develop, whether it's commercial development, residential development in our city. We try to find those people. We try to attract them to opportunities to redevelop here in Cleveland Heights. And when we do, or when somebody just spontaneously comes to us with an idea for a development, the first step is to negotiate and to figure out what's possible. Because that's sometimes a really difficult part about developing in a place like ours, is that sometimes what a developer wants to do is not possible under our current law. And that's something that we see play out over and over again in Cleveland Heights and everywhere else, specifically with zoning, land use restrictions, that kind of thing. So one of the ways that we've tried to make it easier for developers is by implementing something called GRIDICS for Cleveland Heights. So, and anybody can take a look at this. If you just do a Google search for GRIDICS, GRIDICS, Cleveland Heights, it'll take you to a GIS map where you can sort of look at a particular parcel or an area and see exactly what the zoning is for that area. So you can see what kind of land use is possible there, what kind of, restrictions on the form of a structure are possible there. So that's one of the ways we try to attract or receive interest for development. We try to negotiate if there's any city incentives that they're asking for or that might be useful that they don't even know about. In order to make a project work, we try to inform them and educate them about the restrictions in our system here in Cleveland Heights, what they can build and where. And then we try to help make those deals work when they're beneficial to the city. So we'll, help them navigate through Board of Zoning Appeals for some sort of variance or something like that. Potentially we'll try to help them as sort of experts, expert assistants, to navigate a planning commission, for like an appeal for some sort of development overlay that would allow them to build what they want to build, even if our current zoning code doesn't necessarily allow for it. And then we will, if there are incentives to be had, some of those incentives are by right because we've created those sorts of things. We have a CRA, a community reinvestment area citywide, that's sort of tiered depending on where in the city you're trying to build.
Quick thing about GRIDICS. GRIDICS customizes views for us at our request as well.
Okay.
There's something that
Okay, so and that's yeah. It's a helpful tool for developers because then they can sort of see exactly what the landscape is, regulation, and figure out what a future state might be with Gridix, and they don't necessarily have to pour through our zoning code in order to find it out. So that's helpful. But then the second piece is, is this something that requires public land? Is it something that requires some other incentive that isn't by right? And then we will try to negotiate that with them, whether it's an economic development loan or a land swap or a land purchase or something like that. We did something like that with where Grocery Outlet was going in Cedar Fairmount, where we had sort of a blended deal. We purchased a parking lot, and we needed more public parking in the Cedar Fairmount area anyway. So we purchased a public parking lot that the Russos had improved. And we also provided additional funding in the form of a loan. We did the same thing. I think we're proposing the same thing, a similar thing for Park Synagogue. It's not exactly a land purchase. It's a part of the incentive is a grant. But it's intended to make sure that some of that public park space stays public and that people have access to it, even if it's not publicly owned, that there's an ongoing right for the people of Cleveland Heights and elsewhere to come and enjoy that natural space. And then the other portion of that incentive that we're proposing to council is a loan that we would provide for redevelopment there as well. And we take those things to council. And when council's approval is necessary, and we ask for their approval, we bring in the developers, we explain the project, and then council plays its role and either decides to support a particular development or reject it. So we're the ones on the administrative side. We do the negotiation. And then we bring a deal to the council for ratification. That's how it's supposed to work between the executive and legislative branches on this. Oh, yeah. So the other piece of it is, and this is, a fun part about having an in-house building and permitting division now, we didn't used to for a while, is that we still have to do all of the work that a city has to do for health and safety, which is providing permits, and we bring in revenue now, much more revenue than we used to under the old system. So we provide permits, and then we provide that inspection service as well on those permits to make sure that what we have permitted is actually getting built. So that's the other piece of development. Once that deal is struck, once the construction begins, we've got a lot of work to do. We've got the fire inspections, we've got the building inspections. If it's a residential property, there may be, housing inspections that need to take place. And so that work is ongoing until completion of the project, at which point we sign off on certain things as completed the way they should be. And we go from there. Now, if it's commercial development and we've got businesses in there, our economic development team is supposed to stay in contact with those businesses and commercial building owners and make sure that if there are concerns that come up, that those economic development folks are there to almost concierge service with other departments that might need to be contacted. If there's a sewer issue that needs to be taken care of, economic development folks are supposed to be there to help them navigate through the structures of the city to make good things happen more easily. And that's how we work with developers and business owners and property owners in the city. That's how it's designed anyway. Yeah, so like site selection work is difficult for a city like ours. Most of the really intense work is for sites that are larger than we have available to us. Many of the opportunities that people are looking for are sites where we made deliberate decisions to restrict our own access to larger scale transportation networks. That's changing a little bit, I think, with Opportunity Corridor makes it a little bit easier to get into Cleveland Heights, so we might have a better shot. But site selection is a problem, and I think the reason why we are behind the eight ball in a certain respect when it comes to attracting to sites in Cleveland Heights is because those restrictions, the fact that we don't have highway access, the fact that we don't have a lot of land that is easily developable. I think that has led historically this government to pull back, in being more aggressive in recruiting businesses to come here, because I think probably just some level of learned helplessness where you don't have what they want, so you stop asking them to consider you when you don't have what they want. I tried and I've been trying to change that culture a bit here and be more aggressive when it comes to development, but we've got a lot of work to do because we still stand in our own way. It's one thing, to have a more difficult site to sell because it doesn't have highway access, or it's an older building and it hasn't been updated by the building owners, and that kind of thing. It is that much more difficult when you also have structures in place, approval bodies in place that don't have a great track record of saying yes, or certainly don't have a great track record of saying no quickly, which is the second best answer. What we've done in Cleveland Heights is develop a reputation for dragging out a no. And, we've seen that time and time again. It's been one of my missions to shift course on that, but I don't get the final say. So we saw this relatively recently where we had a relatively long process of negotiation. And then it went through a full council process to get to an endpoint where a piece of legislation for a purchase agreement was just indefinitely postponed, which effectively kills a project. And, getting to that point where it should be a yes, where everybody is at least saying that it's a great project, we should do it. And then you have an indefinite postponement of the project is disheartening, and it just leads to more support for the reputation that we've had, which is that we have a long drawn out no at the end of the day. And what we find is that, at the finish, 10 feet from the finish line, somebody says, "Hey, wait, I hadn't heard about this before." And then everything is off the table. It's devastating to our reputation, and it makes it that much more difficult for us to even attract people to this city. So, but when it comes to the question of so that has an impact on site selection, which is interesting. We've got two people at Team Neo who are Cleveland Heights residents. Team Neo is an organization. It's a regional organization that does this work. And, I've reached out to them. We've had meetings, we've talked. But there's a lot of work that Cleveland Heights has to do in order to be ready to more effectively make use of a tool like Team Neo, a partner like Team Neo, to market sites that we have in the city. We're not there yet. We're still working on it. We still need to, and we'll continue to. There might be a time where Cleveland Heights is a more desirable place to locate a business. I think we have a great track record of some really well-supported small businesses in this city over time, but that's only part of the equation here. And, we could make use of some more larger scale office uses or anything like that. I am hopeful that an eventual development at Severance provides some of that opportunity to showcase. And I'm hopeful that once that happens, the city doesn't, as effectively as it has in the past, get in the way of that development actually occurring. And then maybe we'll have more luck when it comes to site selection. But when it comes to filling those vacancies, one of the major issues that we see is that retail is difficult. It's extremely difficult right now. We as a culture have made a shift in how we purchase things, and it has impacted what we say in this community we think is important, which is local small business. And yeah, it is. It's absolutely important, and it's a part of our understanding of this place. At the same time, our purchasing behavior doesn't reflect it all the time. And so that the ability for that world to thrive has contracted a bit. And I don't know that we've found what the balance is here yet. Like, how much local small business can we actually support in a meaningful way based on our current spending habits?
I think that's my biggest concern. I mean, so when I looked at the Cedar or Taylor development, which I thought one was actually pretty darn cool. I mean, it's a heck of an ambitious project that you put together. So, but I also look at it, it's only cool when you see the illustrations that has a lot of life walking to and from the street. So then the question is, well, how do we get that to happen? And what's the attrition rate for other businesses? Do we have the demand for that? And to build something of that magnitude, does it make sense if we already know that from a retail standpoint, things are falling, and buying habits have changed, obviously, as much as we like to spend. And quite frankly, we may not even have the money. So when I look at the demographics at Cleveland Heights, as we lose more middle class, you only have so much discretionary money to spend per month. Where are you going to put it? So I don't know where we're going to get the draw from outside of the city to visit these new developments. And as beautiful as they look, is it sustainable?
I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of the emphasis that we've had is trying to blend residential and retail, do a lot of mixed use work if we can, because we know that the demand is that much easier to provide if you are increasing your population. And Cleveland Heights has been decreasing in population for a very long time. We peaked in the 60s. We're down 25% since the 60s in population. Yeah, 25%. That's not great. That's not a great trend. We're also trending older. We're also, so there are a lot of I believe our poverty rate has risen. So there are a lot of trends in this city that are concerning. It does not help that the age of our housing is, like median age is like 1930 or something. I don't remember exactly what it is, but it's ridiculously old compared to what it could be if we actually developed in ways that made more sense here. But all of that requires changing how we do things. And as a new firefighter told me relatively recently, he was talking about firefighters, but I think it applies to most of us, is that the only thing that we hate more than the way things are is change. So it's hard for us to get there from here until we make the choice to, and I, to a certain degree, start ignoring people who are constantly against any change. Because it's not going to serve us. We can't tread water and expect to get to the farther shore. But the other thing that I don't want to neglect is additional responsibility for filling a vacancy in a commercial structure, or something like that. There is responsibility in our property owners too, and our property owners do need to update those buildings without charging, exorbitant costs to the tenants. It needs to be right sized. The city, I think, doesn't have a huge role to play in demanding. We're not, I don't think, in a position in Cleveland Heights to demand rent control for commercial spaces or something like that. But there are tools that I've attempted to encourage us to take advantage of. One in particular is vacant storefront fee that has been relatively successful in San Francisco. I haven't had the bandwidth to implement it myself as a legislative act. I've asked multiple council members to take it on. People have expressed interest, but I haven't seen that come yet. I imagine that at some point it will be introduced. It will be passed, I hope, for Cleveland Heights, and then it can move forward with that. But that vacant storefront fee provides an incentive for a building owner to fill a vacancy with something. Now, there are concerns about what they would fill it with. They're talking about sort of a vape shop restriction in Cleveland Heights as well. Been talking about that for a while. That was something I suggested too. So you don't want to just fill it with any and everything. I've also suggested the council take up the possibility of doing a zoning restriction on dollar stores and those sorts of small discount stores, because they really can cannibalize from our grocery stores, from other retail establishments that maybe provide more holistic benefit to the community. But so far we haven't seen that legislatively. But I imagine as long as people keep up pressure and lobbying for what they want to see, then council eventually will take that up and make it happen. So, but those are things that can happen to encourage vacancies to get filled, but a lot of it has to do with whether or not a store or a company or a restaurant feels that the market will support it. And if they don't feel that the market will support it in that particular location, especially based on the cost of the rent, the cost of our utilities and labor and all of these things that we have here, if they don't feel like it's going to, and you know this already, if they don't feel like that's going to balance for them, if that's not going to pencil for them, they're not going to do it. They're going to find a place where they can. So a lot of it has to do with the rents we're charging relative to what the tenant is getting out of that building. And if the building hasn't been updated, they can find a new build somewhere else.
Okay. My name's Charles Williams, and I grew up in Cleveland, and I decided to move. I moved to East Cleveland because East Cleveland was the best place to live at that time. But when I was shooting in houses, I was across the street with the road, and all that shit going through that and stuff. So I decided to take my family out. I didn't know if I would move to Second Heights or Beechwood, but then I told me go to Cleveland Heights, and that's the neighborhood. So I moved to Cleveland Heights. I was very happy with Cleveland Heights because they didn't have no mayor at that time. Now I was going to buy house that's what we have to do. Now, I'm so disappointed. Every time I go down the street, I see brick houses, but I'll be ripped, falling apart and all that. This is East Cleveland now, it's not Cleveland House no more. I know why. Because people in the past are gone. Young people are coming in now and trying to run the office. So one time my wife was quick tank. My wife drove over to the Roberts, tried to give a tip to the driver going to drive. He's sitting in the office reading the paper. Well, he sure got to doing his work. He doesn't know his responsibility. Where's the foreman? Where's the supervisor? Oh, yeah, I'll be home soon, yeah. Let me come out of it. I mean, too much for him. Too much pressure on him. He takes it, belt, get the people out and all, go out and work, do their job. The last meeting, what you want the last meeting? Where were you at the last meeting? We went there. One was complaining about the same road. No parking. They fade away. Well, let's go hire me. This is East Cleveland. I used to work for the Chicago County engineer for 34 years. And I know the paint shop, I always paint sides, I take them out, replace them all that. They're not doing it here in Cleveland. They're not doing it. You can't even read a sign. If people come out, you cut my grass, and he mows on the other side of the street. It's supposed to be clean it up, dump it in the truck. Why do we let them do that? And the water comes on, the rain comes on, it's flooded up. What's going on? There's only one person, you can't do everything. Take my guy,
Well, I can address a lot of that. I think, over the last 3.5 years of this term, one of the things that I have known is a really important responsibility of mine is to get back to a level of service that people have expected in Cleveland Heights, that people remember from Cleveland Heights from years ago. And that is not an easy process because there are a lot of moving parts that influence where we are now, that led us to where we are now. One of those things is that we lost a lot of budget a while back. We had to cut budgets, we cut staff, we cut services. There are entire programs that were cut. I think I said this in the last one. In this room, we had childcare, aftercare after school. Our son went through it. It was a phenomenal program, and it's gone maybe 10 years ago, and that's just one example. Another example that I think I've mentioned before is with our grass cutting on the 23 acres of median strips that we have in Cleveland Heights. We used to do that work, that grass cutting, with 10 people every season. And when I became mayor, we had 2 people doing that work, and we haven't been able to staff up in Public Works yet, in part because of something I'm hoping to fix right now. We will be submitting to City Council a new agreement with Laborers Local 860 to try to right size their wages, to try to provide a fair wage to these folks who are doing that work, so that not only can, they're doing hard work and they deserve to be paid fairly, but also because we need to be competitive, and we have fallen behind many of our competing cities when it comes to wages. And so if somebody is looking for a job doing this kind of work, why would they choose us? So I'm hoping council, agrees to this contract. I believe that the bargaining unit already has. And so moving forward, I think council might be hearing it on Monday. So I'm hoping that however that goes, they approve that and we can move forward. It's been the same for a variety of other positions. Both union and non-union positions have experienced this. And so I went through a process of studying our wages, and doing that study had allowed us to support increases in certain positions. And we've been giving, I guess, raises is what you would call it, but really it's just a fair wage for the work that they're doing given our context right now in 2025. So we've been increasing people's wages in non-bargaining unit positions as well, because it's always a cascading effect. If you increase the wages of these people, then you've got their supervisors who, need to have some sort of compression between the work that they do and the line workers or something like that, depending on the nature of the work. And it moves its way on up. And so we've been dealing with all of that cascading wage compression and systematically rolling out these wage increases, which I think should help us recruit a little bit more effectively to fill positions in jobs that we let just get cut through attrition even. Somebody retired, we didn't replace them. And this happened for, 15, 20 years. So that's kind of where we are on that right now. That's part of it. And so when it comes to a really good example, going back to the people who are cutting this grass, there is a perfect way to cut a section of median strip. I don't know exactly what perfection looks like for everybody, but for me, at the very least, it includes taking a string trimmer and doing the edges, doing around, the signs on the, that are on the median strip around the trees. And then taking the mower and doing the bulk of the grass, making sure that it's cleaned up along the edges by the curb, and then taking that grass, those clippings, and removing them, disposing of them. And if you've got 10 people doing that work, it's a little easier to do that work in that way within a given amount of time. Because it's always a question of how much time, because what you see is if our 2 people doing this median work were doing it like that, instead of trying to get it done as quickly as possible, by the time they get to the end of that street, the amount of growth that has occurred on other median strips means that the people of Cleveland Heights want to come to City Hall and shoot me in the face. So that's the kind of thing that we have to weigh is speed, cost and quality. We have to make sure that we are doing everything that we can, but we also have to triage because we don't have unlimited resources right now. We haven't provided ourselves with enough resources to do what we used to do. We're working on it. We're trying to recruit. We're trying to staff up. We've been doing it in police. We've been doing it in fire. We've been doing it in other areas in city government as well. Parks and Rec and Public Works are the primary departments that deal with those sorts of services. And working with Laborers Local 860 to increase wages is one way that we can make it a little easier for us to actually get people in the door and keep them. So that's a short answer to, because it could be a much longer answer. But that's a short answer. But there's one more piece of this, and that's accountability. That's once you get the people in the door, it's our responsibility as an organization to train them to do things the right way and then hold them accountable for what they do. Yeah. And we know that that's a part of it too. We've had those discussions with the union as well. And for a very long time as well in this city government, they have just decided to forego performance evaluations. And so when I became mayor, one of my first directives to the city administrator, who is tasked in the charter with doing this sort of thing, was to create a performance evaluation program for the city because they had abandoned it years and years ago. And none of the city administrators have been able to do it so far, but we did recently hire somebody in finance, well, reporting to the finance director right now, who is sort of on the human resources side a bit, looking at performance and tasked with creating a performance evaluation and improvement program for the city, also dealing with benefits and those sorts of things. And I do have high hopes for this particular hire, very experienced and accomplished in that field. So we're hoping that this time we can actually get it done and then have something structured so that we're not holding people accountable in a subjective way, but we know what the goals are, we know what the capability is, and we can hold somebody accountable for meeting those goals in a way that isn't, subject to favoritism, or that's another problem that we have to deal with in government generally, organizations generally. We don't want it to be so subjective that it just turns into an unfair way for a supervisor to reward the people they like and punish the people they don't, because that's always a risk. So.
Is this on? Okay, somewhat related. Okay. Somewhat related. Okay, I know that the previous planning director, Richard Wong, had a lot to do with developing the really beautiful stormwater plantings at Cumberland Park. And I think it was before you became mayor that somebody, I believe on maintenance staff, just mowed over all of it. I'm not sure the true story, but it was at least $100,000 to $200,000 installation that was fully functioning, correct? So my question related to both maintenance opportunities and staff and coming redevelopment or rebuilding of the pool, is it even feasible for interim reinstallation or other landscaping around Cumberland Pool and fixing up the entrance? Does it even make sense knowing what might be happening with Cumberland Pool?
So yeah, it does. I mean, it does make sense. I do remember getting a lot of communication about those plantings when I first became mayor. Yeah, it was. I don't remember who it was, and probably not useful to point a finger at somebody. But I remember the former Parks and Rec director told me when I inquired about it, because I was getting questions about it, that he had somebody on staff who was really, really good at clear cutting. And that's just what they did. They were not a scalpel. They were a chainsaw. And that was the person who basically got rid of everything. And my understanding is that it was based on some concern that a resident had who was leaving Cumberland Pool at some point, maybe when it was either leaving or arriving, and it was either early in the morning or later at night or something, and maybe it was getting dark, and they were scared because the plantings were tall or taller, and they thought somebody might be hiding behind them ready to ambush them. And I don't know. I didn't receive that complaint. I don't know exactly. Okay. The safety. Trimmed, right. Well, I guess yeah. Well, in this case, it was a strange thing. So they got rid of all of that, and the grant funding for that project was not disturbed at all, because the structure underlying it, not the plantings themselves, but the structure of that space was the real reason. That was the real storm water mitigation. And so the actual grant funding was not disrupted by that change in the plantings. I did take a look a while back And I worked with somebody in the community to develop a possible planting plan replanting plan for Cumberland. I've actually got the designs hung up on a wall at City Hall right now. We haven't gotten to fixing that yet. And in part, it's because I have been hoping that I can create a change in how we do any of those plantings. So it's a difficult situation where everything in an organization relies on the institutional knowledge of a particular person, right? This is the person who is on staff. They're the ones that do the gardening. You know, that's the person, that particular laborer is the one who is very meticulous and they care about this gardening, and they're not the chainsaw, they're the scalpel, you know. And that person has experience doing this and they do it well. And then they retire. And when we are hiring for those particular positions, we've got some contractual obligations, and we're not necessarily going to be able to find a person who does what that person did after 20 years of experience, right? But what I was hoping to do, and I created a horticulturalist position for the city. We had to have some negotiation. I'm not exactly sure where that conversation is right now, because the laborers didn't want that particular, it's a non-union position. It's more a design position. It's not, let's do the work. The laborers will do the work. The horticulturalists will design and guide the work, is the idea, and keep track of our plantings throughout the city, because that's another thing. You can plant something, but if you don't have the capacity to appropriately maintain it, it just turns to crap. And the weeds grow and nobody's pulling them because they're over here doing this, and we have to prioritize. So that's the kind of difficulty that we've had with sort of making sure that doing new plantings, even, we have to make sure that we're maintaining them before we can decide that we're going to sort of re-engage with that.
Just one last quick thing on that. Is there any potential, and has it been done in other departments or with other projects, of having internships and or nonprofit groups or allegiances with like local schools or anything?
Yeah, we've done that. So we've had internships, notably in planning neighborhoods and development internships. We've also partnered with YOU, Youth Opportunities Unlimited, for public works, and we've brought YOU students in, and also for parks and recreation. So we've brought in young adults and youth to through that partnership to do some of that work too, and to learn while they do it. So we've done that. I think that we could probably expand it, and we should expand it. Whoever comes next in this particular role, I would advise them to make sure you've got capacity to manage those things, because what we found, and I've created internship programs before in previous position that I held. And one of the sticking points is, and this was for small businesses, you can provide an intern to a small business. You can even pay that person's salary, through public sources or through subsidy or something like that, or contribute to the payment. But the real difficulty is taking that business owner's time, energy, and attention away from doing the business while they are training, working with, a student, an intern who is going to be drawing focus. And that's a hard thing to ask, not certainly in that case, small business owner to do. And in this case, it's a more difficult thing to ask a stretched, thin public works department. So they've done this kind of thing. I think that we can expand it. Some of the expansion that we've had in management, in public works in particular, and I think some pretty good hires in Parks and Rec, will allow for more of that ongoing. So, oh, okay. They might need you for the recording. Yeah, push it up.
Okay, better. Thank you. Well, I wanted to talk tonight about interpreting services. I know this is not new for you. We've been in Cleveland Heights for decades. You have utilized services that I've had, although I'm retired at this point. My husband continues to want services of interpreters. We thank Mark, who's here tonight, and others who have provided that. Throughout the years, it's been a smooth transition in terms of providing interpreter services. As people come and go from the community, that has fallen through the cracks sometimes. We aren't that many in terms of deaf people and hearing consumers who utilize interpreting services for family members. I just wanted to reiterate that I would really appreciate if staff across the board could be aware of ADA. Recently, we've had some situations, whether it be here at the rec center, in terms of our bringing friends to join us and participate and really enjoy the facilities that Chuck and I have been using 2 to 3 times a week, whether it's the senior center wanting to take classes. And I love the idea that you said local businesses. So I understand recently I dealt with Todd Walburton, I believe, who was in customer relations. Things have kind of fallen through the cracks recently. But it would be wonderful if you could get a memo or somehow alert staff the awareness thing again about ADA and its nuances. Traditionally, people will say, and have said as recently as last week to us, well, just tell them to bring an interpreter, which rankles me and my husband, I'm sure, to no end. We've been educating and fighting and experiencing this for, we'll be married for 44 years plus 6 more probably. So 50 years. So 50 plus years. So that's disconcerting, and we're always happy to educate, but it impinges upon our time to exercise or take a class or have to call Mark when nobody's in customer relations. I think the most salient thing that I remember, and we dealt with it, we did have an interpreter at a community meeting, Noble Neighbors, a while back last year, whenever. And traditionally, people will say, well, let's call the existing facility that provides interpreters. ADA talks very strongly about deferring to the preference of the deaf person. That may not be, and I like what you said about local businesses, because we encourage Chuck to use, and other deaf people to use, the interpreter with whom they feel most comfortable ethically and in terms of skills. That may not be the traditional large agency in a community. And Mark in point, he may affiliate with 5 or 6 other agencies, but you may have one on the list. You used us regularly. We appreciated that. But deaf people have their preferences. I think the most salient issue was when Chuck was having a heart attack and the ambulance came. And I was not allowed to ride in the ambulance. I was so worried and beside myself, of course. When I think of it, even I start having palpitations. I found out from that community meeting that you did not contract with Cleveland Heights. It wasn't a Cleveland Heights facility. It may have been South Euclid or some surrounding ambulance, but they refused to let me ride in the ambulance. He did come to in the ambulance. He was passed out when the EMTs came. How are they going to communicate with him? I tried to stress within 1 minute, you have no iPad, you don't know sign language, he's not going to read what you're writing, English is not his preferred mode of communication, on and on and on and on. So it was a very scary 15-minute ride for me to get to UH and to the hospital, where they had an interpreter available for us. So those are just a few instances that, I really want to stress that people need to be aware, staff. They've been wonderful here, gracious, except for saying, well, just bring an interpreter. No, the staff's been very kind. Just somehow get the word out. This may not be high on your list of sending memos at this point. I mean, We conducted trainings at some point on as far back as 504, back in the 70s when all this began. Maybe that needs to be resurrected, of doing with deaf people, not for deaf people, and getting a Chuck or others to present a panel. We taught how to use a TTY. Well, now not everybody has a computer in the deaf community, but those kinds of nuances. So paramount, I think, is the safety issue. We've brought deaf friends up to the rec center now. There are safety issues there. There are safety issues with an ambulance. And so please be aware of that. And I wasn't going to talk about potholes, but thanks for the paving of Northampton. And the sewers are getting fixed on Northampton. And thank you for the opportunity to do this tonight.
Of course, and thank you. I think one of the things that has been the most difficult to deal with in this role is how slow things happen. Even when you're making changes and you're pushing things forward, you want it to be 4 steps ahead of where you actually end up getting to on any given day. I'm not exactly sure, but I've been told that what I've implemented in Cleveland Heights, we designated 2 ADA coordinators for the city, and Todd Walburn is one of them. We have another in the law department, and we also initiated a study of our facilities for ADA compliance. Got a big report of all of the places where we're not doing a great job, and have started working to make fixes there. I think this is one of those issues that we need to make sure that we stay on top of, and that we're doing it with consideration for people who actually will use the service and communicate with us, instead of thinking that we know, and I certainly don't know.
And you mentioned the finance director. I think that's what we finally got around to for tonight's meeting and hopefully for future meetings. But to stress that you don't have just one person or one agency providing services. We need to be inclusive. It may be private practitioners. I began as a private practitioner. I established an interim services with 4 other women. We are now retired, no longer, but I may do community private practitioner.
Yeah.
Maybe, private services per se. But again, in respect and in deference to what a deaf person wants, it may not be just one agency.
And I think that's part of the difficulty, is that, when we are focused on streamlining because we want efficiency, and that agent, we can contract with them, and then we've got this number to call and we've got no other questions to ask. And that's not what we need to do, clearly.
When you send an interpreter who's not ethical or appropriate or qualified,
Mm-hmm.
there will be repercussions.
Right. And exactly. That's the most important part, is that we're not actually communicating in the way that we are expecting to. And that's problematic for the city, just in terms of we're not getting what we're paying for either. So I'm going to. Oh, good.
Wonderful. I had given him a list that Chuck preferred in terms of interpreters, but there may be something in the works. I wasn't aware that there was a person in the law department.
Yep.
If you would revisit that,
Yeah.
we would appreciate that.
Thank you. And one more thing that we worked on, I know, like, Todd was out for quite a bit. It was unavoidable. It was relatively sudden, but it was unavoidable. And we tried to scramble to backfill from departments to make sure that a lot of the concerns and complaints that go through the Mayor's Action Center were picked up in other ways. But it also, the woman that was out there, the new communications director, had a thought, an idea to, and we're working through what that looks like now, to bring somebody in into comms to work with Todd to be that backstop. So if either one of them, heck, needs to go on vacation, or yeah.
To Tony Kuhl's credit, I tracked him down, and as you may have heard, we did have Mark at another meeting of council, which
Yeah. And I think that that's where sort of that multi-departmental effort is going to have to take place, because this kind of service, where is it coming from? Is it coming from the mayor's office through the mayor's action center? Is it coming out of, if it's a council event or meeting or something like that, is council doing the contracting, or do we centralize it in community services, which is the actual name for our communications department? And so that kind of thing we have to sort out if we're going to do this in a more holistic way and make sure that we're not letting the ball drop in any particular arena. And so I'm looking. I think we should talk some more about this. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. No. And thank you for that, because that's not something that I would just naturally even think of. At this particular stage of my life and where I am, I wouldn't necessarily, because that's not sort of intrinsic to my experience. And so I really appreciate you bringing that up. Thank you. You mentioned potholes. We've still got potholes. And then Drew, thank you. We certainly had a whole heck of a lot of potholes created over the winter and into the spring. And until we were able to get hot patch in April, there's no real, and pothole filling isn't sustainable in and of itself anyway, even with hot patch, but especially with cold patch, it's pretty terrible. And this winter was different. And I think that moving forward, winters are going to be different. We're going to have more freeze thaw cycles, and we're going to have to be a lot more diligent about how we address that, because the way that we have done things is not suitable for the conditions that we are now going to be experiencing. The world's changing. The climate is changing. And so one of the things that I'm hoping that we can do is do more road paving generally. We're going to have to figure out what the sustainable funding mechanism is for that, because we really can't know what CDBG is going to do at this point, what the federal government's going to do to CDBG. And the gas tax is what we have historically used to do our road program. And that's limited. We've only got so much money from gas tax to do that with. And we've only got so much capacity to even manage the contracts. A couple different ways I've been trying to deal with that, again, is building capacity in the upper level management in public works, because for a very long time, Director Klinkscale was doing basically the work of 3 or 4 people. We promoted Tony Ferrone to assistant director for operations in public works, but I realized that we also needed to bring in somebody who would be an assistant director focused on capital projects. We put out a call. We got some really fantastic candidates. We got 2 in particular who were great, and we hired both of them. One to be the assistant director, Virginia Carter, and the other to be the capital projects manager, Eugene Cranford. Both phenomenal, both extremely experienced, and have hit the ground running. What that means is that taking some of that pressure off of the director allows us to manage more work in a more sustainable and a more strategic way. But that's sort of a relatively recent development in terms of capacity building, but I think that it'll pay off dividends for Cleveland Heights in the future. And then hopefully we have less of a need for pothole filling, because we have a more frequent set of road repaving projects that are going on. I think that council and the administration will have to agree on a higher level of funding, but we'll also have to figure out exactly how those things are funded, because historically we've used 2 particular discrete sets of money to do those projects, and we would have to make a decision on where that money's coming from. We can do that. As long as the administration and the council want to work together on it. Or if the council is just willing to take direction from the administration on where that money should come from, that's fine too, as long as it gets done. So that's my goal. Additionally, one more thing I've been working toward is a change in how we even register potholes. For the first time, we did a road analysis using LiDAR. LiDAR is sort of like radar, except it uses lasers to map the topography of a particular area. It can register, cracks underneath the surface of asphalt, that kind of thing. It can register things that are harder to see with the naked eye, and it registers them in a very unbiased way. When before Cleveland Heights, we would, and this is not that, people with experience can go out there and review the roads and judge their condition in an expert way and in an unbiased way. But, taking, this out of the hands of somebody just eyeballing it is helpful and effective and faster too. So we pursued that as a way to do our road condition survey. We got the results back, and that's how we determine which roads are in the worst shape, so that we can then put them, higher up on the list for repaving. Obviously subject to other scheduled projects like sewer projects that we know are coming down the pike, or water, main replacements that we know are scheduled, or gas line, projects that we know are scheduled. So there's a little complexity in the scheduling, but that's how we determine the road conditions. But that was a service that we were trying out. We had a service come in and do that analysis for us. But my plan and my goal and my hope for the future Cleveland Heights government is that we make a capital improvement, expense to create additional equipment that this is something that we can purchase and install on, say, our recycling trucks or our garbage trucks that are going throughout our city on every road constantly. So they are constantly out on every street in this city. And if we install a piece of equipment that has that LiDAR attached to it, so it's constantly scanning the roads that it's traveling, feeding that data back into the system, we will have an up-to-date understanding every week of the condition of each of our roads. And so when you see a road start to crack, well, maybe we can have somebody come in and do crack sealing on that road because we've got just-in-time information about the condition of that stretch of road. And in that way, we can extend the life of our roads. So when winter does come, we've got our freeze-thaw cycles, we have less water intrusion, we can account for what really happens, sort of the spider cracking that happens underneath the asphalt surface when cars drive over it, that lead to potholes primarily, that kind of thing as well. It's a issue of traffic, it's an issue of water intrusion, and having up-to-date information about the condition of each road means that we can address those things more proactively. That's a future plan. It was something I was hoping to do in the next term, but the next administration can do that if they choose to. So that potholes, long-term plans for potholes, I guess. All right. Drew.
Yeah. I have 3 questions, but I'll ask one and get back in line. Basically, it's like what this woman was saying. Why doesn't the city take ADA compliance seriously? The automatic door to the community center here is broken as much as it is working, and you don't need LiDAR to see that. It's like the staff come in every day and see that. We meet you coming and going, trying to get out those doors. Those are heavy doors. Why isn't anybody doing so? I mean, that is right there. Yes, exactly. It brings the community together trying to open one of those damn doors. And it's broken as much as it's working. And it's like, this is the community center. If you don't take disability access to the community center seriously, how can we believe you that LiDAR is going to solve pothole problems?
That's a good point.
The street I live on has got a person who uses a wheelchair. The crosswalk signal was inaccessible to anybody using a wheelchair. I reported that over a year ago. I re-reported it. I took photos. I sent photos. It took them 6 months, 3 months before they actually sent anybody out. We live 5 minutes from City Hall. 3 months before anybody sent anybody out. 6 months before they actually dealt with the kind of thing. That was just one crossing signal for somebody who's using a wheelchair, and it took 6 months for the city to respond. Got a broken sidewalk. Now, this is not unique to Cleveland Heights because ADA is not very popular anymore, kind of thing. A lot of our sidewalks are inaccessible to anybody using a walker or a wheelchair. They have to go into the street if they can find a curb cut or a driveway that doesn't also have a drop off. It's so pervasive, and apparently it's invisible to anybody who isn't thinking about maybe someday I may be using a walker, I may be losing my hearing, or I may be losing my sight. It's in the first part of the pandemic, we were taking disability justice a little bit more seriously because we were all realizing we were that close from being disabled ourselves. That seems to have been memory hold along with the whole, millions of people died from a virus kind of thing. I would love to see this city get and I'll finish up now. 2 people working on disability in the city is not enough. Every department head should get some disability training to say, how does my department affect the disability community? To me, that should just be standard so that we're not, when Todd Walburn leaves town, everything collapses or somebody in communications. Every single department director should have disability training and a disability practice manual to go along with their position. Thanks.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think you're absolutely right. And it's certainly, not the clearest spot in my vision, so I appreciate being pushed on this. I know that a lot of what government does is we spend a lot of time thinking about what we're doing. And so we'll think about how much money we're spending on curb cuts and ADA, changes in the sidewalk ramping down to the street to cross and that kind of thing. And we're thinking about how much CDBG dollars we're putting toward that, and thinking that we're doing a good job because we're spending X number of dollars. We're, doing this number of projects. And we tell ourselves we can't do everything all at once. And I guess maybe in that way we try to absolve ourselves of not doing more. But I think you're right that a lot of it isn't necessarily just some sort of determination that we're not trying, that we're not working hard to do it, and sort of trying to avoid feeling blamed for things. And so in that way, we just avoid thinking about the more we could be doing. Oh, sure. Yeah.
I agree with you. I come here 3 times a week from the exercise. And, 3 times a week from Did you hear me? I'm a whisperer. Okay, I agree with you. I come here 3 times a week. And this week, last week, is summer camp for the young kids. And unbelievable. They can't even open up the door when they run here to the parents. They can't open the door. And my wife had to push me to a special door, hit the button, and all of a sudden the button broke down. And I had to wait. How long did we wait?
A minute.
So, therefore, I'm not blaming. I'm personally blaming the director of the building. He or she is not doing their job. That's whose responsibility and report to the council. But they need to improve this because maybe Beechwood or South Euclid recreation is better than ours. Maybe they have better service though. But I'm glad you spoke up. Thank you.
And I appreciate that too. And I think you're also right about we can't just rely on, okay, well, we've got these 2 ADA coordinators, we're fine. Part of their job is to make sure that the rest of the organization is growing in that way too. That's part of why we have them, so that we can have people who are focused on it a little bit more exclusively, but as a resource to encourage and provide tools for the departments to start incorporating all of these things into the work that we just should do. And it's sort of the same with sustainability. Yeah, it's the same. You know, it's a particular focus that our sustainability coordinator has, but the goal is to use that position to help all of the other departments incorporate those concepts into the work that we do so that it just becomes standard. We haven't gotten there yet with either of those things. And that's a huge culture shift in an organization. Certainly, yeah. I don't think, I could be wrong. There could be somebody, in Cleveland Heights who would have been able to do this over the last 3.5 years to sort of turn that ship completely. I have not been able to. I wasn't expecting to in this time frame, but I know that we've made some progress, but I know that we haven't gotten close to where we need to be yet. So that's something that I hope we continue working through. I hope that the positions that are in place right now that address those issues, ADA compliance and obviously with sustainability, are maintained in the next government, so that they can continue to have that impact and grow it over time. But no matter what, I think that it's true that all of you bringing it up will make it that much more likely for it to matter in a long-term way. And the thing that people have to remember is that all of the changes that we've made for, ostensibly with, somebody with a mobility issue or somebody with a hearing issue or something, all of the changes that we've made, the technology that we've created, benefit all the rest of us too. I watch things with subtitles. Many of us do. And it's not because I have a particular issue but it's a convenience for me when it's a necessity for somebody else. But I should think of it as, no, it's a good thing that I don't have to step down off of a curb in order to cross a street. It'd be an even greater thing if we had raised crosswalks, but that's the kind of thing that would benefit me. I shouldn't think of it as something that we have to do for somebody else. I think we'll get there. I know that we've got a lot of work to do. And when it comes to sort of those, what a director might think of, we got to fix that door. They're also thinking about the fact that, the roof is caving in at a facility, or, this other major problem. We got to spend millions of dollars to make sure that we're not polluting Dugway Brook, those sorts of things. All of those things are on a relatively small number of people's plate, and that always causes problems. It doesn't absolve us of the responsibility, though. I don't even know if that was an answer to the, yeah.
This is this is more of a comment than a question. It seems like all these, it just comes down to whether or not we sufficiently care about the rest of the people that live in Cleveland Heights. And I see these situations at school where, if the elevator's down for 2 days or 3 days, or for some reason the back door is not open, then the person who can only walk or walks with a walker can't get in from the parking lot, or that they can't get up it's the question of whether or not we actually are invested in the well-being of the entire city and all of its citizens. And I think that obviously on the global stage, that is lacking. And I think in the city, it's lacking. and it's been lacking sort of dramatically. And I think that schools are something that the piece of the schools, which is, as far as finding people, educating people to both, be able to have a fulfilling job, go to school, whatever, but also to be participatory citizens when they leave, is essential. And unfortunately, we have at least in my community, so many of the people in Cleveland Heights don't use our public schools. And the disinvestment, and then, it's just the chain reaction that we see, then the jobs that are available for these kids when they get out. And you're talking about, wage structures in your business, and I look at the opportunities available, and, it's hard to be really optimistic, having grown up here, seeing what, looking at this terrible dichotomy between the haves and the have-nots in Cleveland Heights. It breeds not just misunderstandings, but, all the problems that people don't want this in my backyard. People don't want this to change. People want it only the way that they're used to having it. No one can see it. I'm guilty of that also. And my little example is Cumberland Pool. Back when you and I had a disagreement about it, about whether or not it should stay the way it is, or whether it should change to serve a different population, and hopefully a growing population, maybe young people, young kids, more young parents. But I was selfish. I looked at that and I said, man, I want my lane. I want to swim in my lane. I don't want to lose my lanes. I like this view. I sit here and this is beautiful to me, and I've had this for all my life. And why should I lose that? That's white privilege, and it's mine. And I had to look at that point, and then I saw where that went. I saw what that selfishness created, and now the little incremental things that have been done at the pool, which I love, like I love the school and the library, have, like, bringing in the basketball hoop, making rules that don't dissuade people from using the pool, finding ways to make our, things more equitable, so that as far as how the people who work there relate to the patrons, all of those things are necessary changes. And if you ask me now, will I give up a lane? I think we should give up more than one lane. I was looking, and we don't have enough space for the kids to have lessons, and it's just that change. It's a change of, people want what they have always had. That gets in the way of development. It gets in the way of change. It gets in the way of serving diverse populations, and I think you could have made but you can't fix it in the short term, and I can't fix it, and a little group of people can't fix it, but we can all keep trying. All right, I don't know what that was a little soapbox, but I have to go feed my family, and I hope that next time, I have a suggestion for next time, maybe we talk about culture, Cleveland Heights culture, historically and at the moment, and what we can do to make it a place where actually we all want to live in and can all be happy and safe.
I like that. Thank you. I know you have to go, but I did want to address one thing it's sort of in a more general way, I guess it speaks to all of it. But when it comes to potential change at Cumberland, one of the things that I was thinking about was, because I was getting hammered, right, with people telling me, you need to talk to the people who are using this pool. We've used this pool for, X number of years, and this is what we do. This is what we want. We don't want, the Beechwood thing. Don't bring us any slides. We know what we want. And I said, okay, I hear you. And I think that your perspective as people who use this place is extremely important. And we have to take it into account. But my follow-up question is, what about the people who don't use it but could? Why don't they? The people who are just not enjoying this amenity, this jewel in Cleveland Heights, why aren't they here? Because maybe it's busy lives. Maybe it's, they don't want to buy a pool pass. Maybe it's they don't love swimming as much as you do. I don't know, Maybe they, or maybe they've got a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old, and it's, it's difficult to manage both of them the way the pool is currently structured. You can't be over in the wading pool and with your 2-year-old and be, with your 6-year-old who isn't going to have any fun in the wading pool. Really. They want to swim. And so what do you do there as a single parent with a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old? Well, you don't go to the pool because you can't address both of your kids' needs there. And so, that's the kind of thing that you start to try to think creatively about, maintaining a lot of what we love about Cumberland, but also at least considering the possibility for a 0 depth entry so that the 6-year-old can, be within sight and reach potentially of the parent who is also dealing with the 2-year-old, because it's a 0 depth entry and you can go all the way to where a 6-year-old can play too. Right. And that's the thing. Anybody who is facing down a change that will potentially, in their mind at least, take something away from them is going to be much more vocal, much more energized, much more aggressive about it than somebody who may at some point in the near future or far future possibly experience some benefit. Right. Yeah. And that, honestly, that I think that concept speaks to a lot of what I've faced as mayor in a system where there are select people and select populations within our community who feel more connected to the institutions of the government or even the schools, people who feel more connected to those things. And in part, it's sort of this path dependent thing where they've got relationships with people. So, I had a meeting with somebody, a while back, and they were telling me like, yeah, I pick up the phone and, I could have a pothole filled that day on my street. That's lovely. I mean, yeah, no, right? If you're the person who has that kind of access, that feels great. And I don't, judge anybody too harshly for feeling great being able to do that. Like that, I also recognize though that, when I came in office, I knew that I wanted to get away from that. I wanted to get away from people who there's a weird, line where entitlement and, I don't know, privilege, those sorts of things meet with a larger community need. And when you've got a situation like ours over the last 2 decades where services have been cut, where budgets have been cut, where we have more and more restricted ourselves in terms of what we can actually get done, then not only are you perpetuating a system where some people get special treatment because they know a guy or they've got relationships or something like that. But when you are directing attention in that way, you are removing attention from everyone else. And when you have lowered capacity, but you're still addressing the needs of the people who have access, then what you're really doing is just removing a lot more from the other people who were maybe getting by with, appropriate services, even though these people were getting special treatment. Well, when you've got less capacity to provide those services and you're continuing to give special treatment, well, you're taking it away from the people who don't feel entitled, who don't have those connections. Right. They check out, they don't pay attention. I think we've seen a lot of that where you've got a small town feel in Cleveland Heights that somehow exists even though we're not a small town. And it exists that way because there is a group of people who feel connected, and then there are a lot of people who don't. Most, yeah. I mean, generally, yeah. And I know, and I knew that any move that I made that would disrupt that was going to cause me problems. The shift to really reinforcing the Mayor's Action Center and the app and all of that, in and of itself, it has its struggles, right? Just logistically, and there are hurdles to face and problems that we have to encounter and then solve, just from a management perspective and an organizational perspective. But on top of that, the emphasis of using that as a mechanism for tracking, prioritizing, pulling in complaints, in and of itself, if we are using that the way that it should be used, it makes the complaint resolution process more egalitarian. And that's a problem for some people. It's a problem for the person who can make the phone call. So, and it's the same with the change at the pool that I expect will take place at some point within the next 5 years. Probably within the next 3 or 2 years, we will have to rebuild that pool. I've attempted to forestall it through repairs, but we repair one system and another system is a problem. And we're experiencing that right now. So at the end of this season, we're going to have to do some massive work very quickly in order to be ready for next season. And throughout that process, I'm sure the community will need to re-engage in the conversation about what Cumberland looks like after the rebuild. The discussion last time got difficult, and it didn't seem productive, and we weren't ready anyway.
I think that that's my suggestion for that when that discussion happens is actually have someone walking around this day, talking to all the people that don't come to the meetings and saying, what do you got?
Oh yeah. So the people not picking that up, basically, so in the process for the rebuild, you said that we need to have people at the pool talking to people who aren't necessarily coming to the community meetings. Maybe they're there, they've got a day pass, but you can talk to them too, right? And ask them what they like about the pool, what they, would like to see in a change, what they wish they could do there, why they don't have a season pass, those sorts of things, that kind of thing, and ask those questions. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
This is a cultural point here.
Yeah.
I don't know how long these meetings go. Are we going much longer? Because maybe Mark needs a 5 minutes. Do they last to 8:15?
Right?
Well, honestly, I'm likely to just sit here all night and, right. But we don't have to. I just tend to lose track of time on this kind of thing. But I think what is scheduled to 8:15, so got about 25 minutes. Did you guys want to take you can certainly take a break. We can take a break or a quick break or. Okay. Do you need to take a break? You good? Okay. All right. All right. And you, and then Drew, you had another question? Okay.
Okay, I'll be quick. On the pool, I've only been there about 7 times this season. I'm like shocked. I've told Tom, there's hardly anybody there, and I'm there at different times on different days. And I was really shocked. I've been shocked at how low the usage does seem to be compared with the huge uproar about possible closings. Very often I see up to 14 lifeguards playing cards off in the corner. They've got some people who attend the dressing rooms that are busy all the time, but then the outside maintenance, like there's nothing going on. And it sort of seems like, are the lifeguards totally prohibited from doing anything except sitting and playing cards and switching out as lifeguards? I mean, I get that they need it, but then there's often double the number of lifeguards as actual patrons using the pool. A lot of empty water.
Well, I think that's part of the difficulty with staffing the pool is that we can never know on any given day what the demand's going to be. So we have to staff it assuming that, it could be crowded and somebody could drown, and so that's part of the difference. So we do have people sort of in reserve waiting, and that's important. It's necessary. We don't really have another model for staffing the pool with the lifeguards. Now, the other difficulty is that, lifeguards are trained and hired to do that job. Somebody drops a can on the ground or something like that. Anybody can grab it and throw it in the garbage. There are certain maintenance issues that, no, they are not authorized to do and they shouldn't be doing. And that's part of the need for making this shift in our building and facilities maintenance so that the larger issues are better addressed and staffing up there in an ongoing way until we get to a point where we have enough people and the right processes to actually get those jobs done a lot easier and faster and more efficiently and all of that stuff. But yeah, I know what you mean. And it does like looking at that and recognizing that, okay, we got all these kids, not all of them are kids, but kids to me mostly, just hanging out and that kind of thing. But it really is important that they're there and ready because you don't know what kind of situation could pop off at any given point. And if you've got lifeguards that are on the deck and then something happens and they need to jump in, well, then other people need to come and backfill and make sure that something else doesn't happen while they're addressing that emergency. Because you can't know what's going to happen, and we don't want anybody to die at the pool, ultimately.
Thank you. This starts with this gentleman's observation about a porch railing. If you buy an old house in this city, the city forces you to keep it old because of their architectural things like that. It's like you cannot fix your house unless you are extremely well-to-do to fix it up to the code of original restoration kind of thing, which is a form of gentrification. And I think that's one of the things that is why Cleveland Heights is failing in its population and other things is this covert gentrification. That means you have to be quite well-to-do to live here and keep your house in good order because of the city's restrictions on improvements. And here's where my question goes crazy, because in this country, gentrification is a form of racism. And that is the conversation that Cleveland Heights, along with the rest of the country, just does not want to have. I want to thank you for, under extreme duress, bringing up the role that racism has played in some of the local politics here. And I know you've paid a high price for that. And I don't know what we can do to have this conversation. You are being punished so much for pointing out something that everybody sees and nobody wants to talk about. So this was a stretch here from a porch railing to systemic racism kind of thing, but they really are connected because that's what's killing Cleveland Heights and the rest of the country is not seeing how racism, like the failure to address disability issues, affects all of us. So if you can get a question out of that, feel free to, but thank you.
Well, I thank you for that. I'll tell you, one thing that you said that I disagree with is that everybody sees it and nobody's willing to talk about it. I agree with most of that statement in that mostly nobody's willing to talk about it. I don't think everybody sees it. And maybe it's willful blindness, but I don't think everybody sees it. I think that there are people who definitely believe that we are past that in Cleveland Heights. That if you are here, it is because you can't have something within your worldview that is problematic to that degree because you're here. Right. And that's problematic because, you know, I don't think that any of us should feel exempt. I know that I'm not from having the biases and the, you know, whether conscious or unconscious, if I become conscious of them, I try to attack them. But enculturated here, Cleveland Heights is America. It is. I think sometimes we don't think it is. Cleveland Heights is Ohio. It is. And we choose to see ourselves differently, but I think that comes at a cost. I think it's very, very fine to appreciate the legacy that we have. I think it's great to look at it, to laud it, to recognize it as an inspiration, but an inspiration is intended for additional work. That's what inspiration's for. And if you are ever at a point where you say there's no additional work necessary, well, I don't know. I think you failed. That's just my opinion, and it's my opinion of this place. We've done a whole lot of good, and there are people who are still doing a whole lot of good on those issues right now. I don't want to pretend like, you know, we are exactly the same in all the ways, but we are also not exempt. We are not the beloved community here. It's just we haven't gotten there. We've still got work to do. And I think that in a practical way, the things that you mentioned are good examples of that. You know, I've sat in on, you know, Board of Zoning Appeals meetings where I see a group of people coming in to protest a homeowner's potential change or architectural review board or something like that. You know, some change that a homeowner or a contractor is trying to make, and watching it, the people in that room who have concerns, I'm sure that, you know, when they go home at night and they think about what they did that day, they do not think that they were engaged in something that has any influence from racial bias. But there's a reason why, until this particular federal administration, we cared about disparate impact, because we know that when you look at the impact of your decision making and it all tends to skew in a particular direction, at least, you know, statistically, you can start, whether or not you can prove that in somebody's mind they had this particular conscious motivation, you can show, though, that the impact points to a particular motivation, whether or not it was spoken, whether or not it was conscious. And then you should use that information to inform that decision-making process and be conscious of it, because you can see the effect that you're having. The planning director, you know, when I became mayor, was the first to point this out to me with our approval bodies. Approval bodies, the Board of Zoning Appeals, the Architectural Board of Review, the Planning Commission. And he wasn't too shy to tell me that he thought that a lot of the decision making that they were doing had racial implications and racial bias in them that he saw, and that it was something that we needed to fix. I don't appoint to those boards, you know, and I don't think that those questions are really explored when those appointment processes take place. So there isn't a lot for me to fix, or there isn't a lot that I'm empowered to fix in this particular context. I don't know what the next administration is going to be capable of, but perhaps with a better relationship between the mayor and the council will be willing to do what many other jurisdictions do, which is allow the mayor some say in the appointment to those boards, and in which case maybe that can be a question that a mayor will ask for a prospective appointee. And wrap up soon. Okay. Well, okay, but I do want to address this. There's definitely a lot of work to do. Part of the difficulty in being more aggressive in our enforcement of those building and housing standards is that we know that people's economic situations are not always, as great as they could be. What we don't want to do is cause a larger problem than we are trying to solve. And so you see it a lot, and you see it a lot in the city of Cleveland, even more so than here, where Frank Jackson, for instance, was, at least as told to me, I don't know, I didn't get it directly from him, but he didn't want, Ms. Jameson down the street to have to go to housing court or get kicked out of her house or something because she can't right now afford to fix, that issue that maybe her neighbor down the street, is upset about, because, it's like, what is the problem that we cause when we force Ms. Jameson out of the house, or when we, it's difficult because, until now we've been trying to put more resources toward assisting people with correcting those violations and that kind of thing. But you're right. We've still got the barrier of somebody who wants maybe to invest in this community, but then runs into the roadblock that they can't change the shingles on their house or something like that, or they won't let them, replace the windows along the rear of the house because they can't afford to replace all of the windows with the matching set right now. And so, the Architectural Board of Review says, nope, we don't like your plan. We're not going to allow it. And that has a direct impact on, what our community looks like, the pressure that we place on people who live in our community who might want to replace some of their windows and not all of them right now. And it is in the interest of this ephemeral, subjective, we don't like how that looks. I know that it's important. I know the aesthetic of a place is important. It is. It's in very large part a reason why many of us purchased that home or moved into that apartment, because of the aesthetic of the place, because of the feel of the place right now. But you can't grow and stay stagnant at the same time. It's not possible. And so we should expect change to happen. We should be flexible. When it does, obviously we should fight for the change we want to see, and hopefully fight for, the preservation of the core of what our community is about. But whether or not the windows look a particular way, I'm not exactly sure that that's the core. If it is, then maybe this community isn't what we say it is. So I think it's important, but it also has to be in its place. And we have to pair progress and preservation in a balanced way. But going back to this issue, we all know that in our system, in our community, in our society, I'll just be blunt, Black people have less wealth than white people. We have less access to wealth and capital than white people. We know this. We live in a community that is 40% Black, maybe 45% white, somewhere in there. We know that statistically, Black people have fewer resources to draw on in order to improve that house. Do they not deserve to live in this community if they can't? Okay. Some people might say yes. Some people might say yes. If you don't deserve to live here if you can't maintain your house to my standard, because this is the standard that we have set. This is the standard that we have codified. So if you can't do it, sell your house to somebody who can. Go somewhere else. I think that's a bit heartless, frankly, and I think it's a bit short-sighted. And it also does not recognize the impact, the disparate impact that it has within the context of the fact that black people have less access to wealth than white people. And it's a dramatic difference. We have not, achieved that, the closing of that gap here. Cleveland Heights is still America. We're still here. And so when you look at it in that context, you ignore reality if you don't think that your decision making about how we approach these things doesn't have a racial impact, a racialized impact, because everything does. All of these decisions do. But that's the discussion that is very difficult for people to have, because in their mind, they're thinking, no, I just want a neighborhood where, that house has a railing and that's fine. You know what I'm saying? Like, or whatever the case may be. They're not thinking of necessarily, well, that homeowner over there doesn't look like they belong here. They might feel it in a way. They might not consciously think it. And if they're not thinking it, if they're not having those words in their head that black family over there, they don't, I don't like them because they're black. If they're not thinking that, then, or saying it even, then there are a lot of people in our community who will resist the idea that it could possibly have an influence on how somebody sees that family over there. How somebody sees how loud the kids are being in the front yard. I've seen a bunch of loud kids of all different, races and ethnic backgrounds. Kids can be loud. They can be rambunctious. They can do things that are unsafe. They can, throw a football around in a parking lot of a Swenson's, say, for instance, late at night. Now, this is an example that is a real life example. I watched a group of probably 15, 16, 17-year-old kids get out at Swenson's over in University Heights, and they were just tossing a football back and forth in the parking lot. Now, there are people driving around. It's nighttime. It's not the safest thing to do. It's certainly not the most considerate thing to do. You could hit somebody with that football. You could hit somebody's car with that football. You could get hit by a car in this parking lot. All sorts of reasons why this behavior is problematic. This was a group of maybe 6, 7 white kids. And as we were watching them do this, we didn't have a huge problem with it. We recognized the risk. We didn't want them to hit our car with a football or something like that. But we were watching them and we were thinking to ourselves, in this moment, in University Heights on the border with Beechwood, what if this was 5 or 6, 15, 16, 70-year-old black boys? We didn't experience the counterfactual that night to see what would have happened if everything was the same except for the race of these children. But based on life experience and, experience of the world over 46, almost 47 years now, it's pretty obvious to me that there could have been a dramatically different response to these kids being loud, throwing a football around at night in the parking lot of a fast food establishment. Well, what does that mean? that means that, yeah, I'm sorry, we do look at people differently. We interpret their behavior differently based on the signals that we have been enculturated to recognize consciously or unconsciously. And so you might be more and not even realize that you're more likely to call the city to report, the grass next door or across the street or something, depending on who your neighbor is, who your neighbor happens to be. And so it's hard for people to pinpoint that this is why, because they don't realize that it's happening. One good example, though, I recently had some difficult interaction with a neighbor who decided he was going to yell out of his car window as my wife was out in the yard doing yard work. And, I tried to have a civil conversation with the man, and he was not into it. And ultimately called the police on me when I tried to give him mail that had fallen out of his mail slot. He doesn't like that there are certain things about my 110-year-old house that are causing me nightmares. But one thing that I recently had a discussion about was the condition of my house before we purchased it. The previous owners of our house, unfortunately, we benefited from the previous owner's misfortune here. And I recognize that. And it's sort of a, bittersweet kind of thing to think about. We purchased a foreclosed house. This was in 2009. After the mortgage foreclosure crisis, we purchased a house that had major problems in the yard, in the house, major problems. Many of those problems, peeling paint, and the yard was completely overgrown. The ivy came up to my knee. Major issues with the house. The previous owners, I don't think, would have been subjected to the same vitriol at that time from their neighbor, who I presume, lived there, had the same occasion to witness the condition of the house when it was in disrepair previously under previous owners. I certainly haven't heard any stories from our longer term neighbors about somebody, verbally assaulting somebody at that house before we were the owners. And that's something like, again, we can't know the counterfactual, but I think it's probable that those previous owners who, were of a different ethnic background than my wife and I, were probably not going to be subject to that same level of sort of violent reaction. And I think that speaks a lot to what we need to face. It's not something that we can't overcome. But if we don't choose to face it and at least acknowledge the possibility, then that absolutely is a recipe for we will never overcome. That's problematic because we should be an inclusive community. We should be a community that strives for more inclusion, more community that embraces and wraps itself around all of the people who live here. And I'm afraid that we're getting meaner and meaner. And as we get meaner and meaner, the people who are at the least advantage will feel the brunt of that the worst.
Please, that sounds better. Please answer his question, not to tell stories. You have spent almost 2 hours telling stories. Just answer the question. That's it. I appreciate it. Thank you. I learned that when I was in Washington, D.C. I was like in your shoes. Councilman Lusso came to me, explained it to me. People are going to sleep. Just only answer the question, make it short and simple, and I learned something, so I'm passing on to you.
I never claimed to not be long-winded. I know it. My apologies for that. You know, one thing that I know I should probably get better at is, well, thank you. But you know, sort of that concise statement at the beginning, and then if there's room for additional color, I can provide it. But I do want to ask, you know, let's talk about sort of the core of the question. Maybe you can help me, and I can practice being concise in a response.
I wanted to thank you for, under great pressure, bringing up the racism. And because I know you paid a high price, I'm just struggling with how we can have this conversation when the country as a whole refuses to have it. And there is no short answer to that. I understand that. I knew my question would take up all the available time left, kind of thing. So your 2-minute analysis of what's going on in Cleveland Heights, which you did say at length about some people just can't see it because it would challenge their belief that Cleveland Heights is post-racial.
Well, that's part of it. That's part of it. So I think ultimately the very shortest possible answer that I can provide to that question is 2 words, and it leaves out a lot. But I'm going to start there, and then I'm going to try to expand to a little bit longer answer. How do we have that?
He'll keep time.
Yeah. But how do we have that conversation? We can't. That's where we are right now. We can't. Certainly not as a community. Some of us can. And there may be occasion to bring a few people along who might be able to grow, even if they don't know that they're willing to. But no, I don't think that we can. And it's not just because of their conception of Cleveland Heights. It is because of their image of themselves and their image of themselves in relation to Cleveland Heights, because a lot of people here think of themselves as Cleveland Heights. They don't recognize that sort of creates in its existence, you create its opposite. And so if you're Cleveland Heights, that means somebody else maybe isn't. But, you know, this idea of oneself as not bad. I'm not a bad person. I'm not a villain. I'm not, you know, I would never get on a horse in a hood and burn some black family's house down. I would never do that. I don't call people nigger. I don't, you know, try to get people fired from their job with the very clear reason that they're a black person and I don't want them to have a job or something like that. You know, they don't view themselves as that villain. And we have created this dichotomy where you either are a racist, or you are not a racist. And when you've created that dichotomy and there's no way to be, to have any, qualities of this side without being fully a racist, irredeemable, then you completely divorce yourself from any possible conversation with nuance. A lot of times people can have the conversation in the abstract, and they can recognize that everybody that, treats people in racialized ways or has racial bias or something like that, they can speak about it in the abstract or in the foreign. They can think about some other place or some other people. But very often, all too often, when we think about ourselves, we think about ourselves in this good versus evil dichotomy, and we think of ourselves as I would never, no, no, I've got all these other reasons why I don't like that person, or I don't want to talk to them, or I'm scared to go and tell them that their kids are being too loud or something like that. You know, I don't feel comfortable building community with that neighbor, but it's not because of this. It's because they're, you know, they're scary in a different way. So yeah, long story short, I guess we can't really have that conversation until people are willing to have the conversation. And we are too stuck in this dichotomy that just doesn't accept nuance. It doesn't accept that you can be an okay person and also have some things to work through. We accept it in the abstract. We don't accept it in the personal. Thanks, y'all. I guess we're wrapping up. It's late, I guess. Yes. Thank you all for being here. All right. Maybe I'll see you on the next one. Maybe we'll be talking about Cleveland Heights culture and what that means.